Hello, Albertans. Today, I'm embarking on an historical journey to expose Jason Kenney as the Liberal bastard from Ontario. We're going to go through Jason Kenney and hear from him in his history in his own words over his career from Parliament to Cabinet under Prime Minister Harper all the way to Premier of Alberta. In his own words and history, you're going to see and be exposed to his attacks against our Charter of Rights and Freedoms several times. You're going to hear out of his own words his knowledge, vast knowledge of that Canadian Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we're going to go through from then till now what was predicted well over a decade ago, and Jason Kenney himself was called out on it. You're going to hear about that. We're going to get into the most recent Bill 32. I'm going to be making several videos. I'm going to need you to like and subscribe because this is going to get real serious. I myself am involved in freedom of an expression where I'm going to be challenging that right. And I'm going to go through just exactly what Jason Kenney has done to the good people of Alberta and what he's tried to do to the people of Canada, and he is succeeding. So stay tuned. This is going to get hairy, and watch as I expose Jason Kenney throughout this video series. Thank you. To begin, let's start with Trump and the GOP, the Republican Party of the United States, where Jason Kenney has put Alberta in a tremendously terrible position with the United States of America. Let's hear from Jason Kenney in his own words, and then we're going to get into it.
The announcement today by President Trump is extremely disappointing. It reminds me of what happened in 1939 and 1940 when Canada was part of the fight against global fascism. The United States sat out the first 2 or 3 years and actually initially refused to even provide supplies to Canada and the United Kingdom that was leading the fight at the time.
So why did America not enter the Second World War until 1941? 2 years after the conflict started in Europe? That question has never truly been answered, ever until today, as I take you on a journey through the GOP and the archives of what really happened and why. The answer to why the United States of America did not enter World War II is this simple. They were never or ever going to be a member of the League of Nations. The League of Nations was the power in place before the United Nations was formed in 1948, 3 years after World War II had ended, led by the United States of America. Before that time, it was the League of Nations that was the power and control over the world's nations. Germany, Spain, and many other nations of Europe were all part of that. World War II was a war of the League of Nations, to which the United States of America was not a member, never was. They were isolationists. They were America first. Donald Trump did not create America first. He is a master reader, a massive historian who's read mass amounts of literature of his country, the United States of America. Everything Donald Trump does is according to American history, held true to the Constitution of the United States and the Founding Fathers' build of the United States. President Woodrow Wilson would try to convince the American people that becoming a member of the League of Nations would be the best thing to push America forward. Unfortunately for him, it was clear that the public support was not there. At over 65% of the American population did not want Article 10 to take away the sovereignty of the American people, forcing their hand into any conflict where any member of the League of Nations was threatened. This would be Germany, this would be all kinds of European states. The Republicans won over the American people, and they crushed the League of Nations and any membership that would ever be brought forward. This wasn't the only article, but it was the main article that stopped USA from giving up its sovereignty. Next, we're going to get into the law of the sea. Here we have the United States Arctic portion of some of their Arctic fleet aging. You're going to notice by this article, May 13th, 2020, it says the United States must defend open seas in the Arctic. Okay? This is Canadian Navy enters new era with long-awaited Arctic warship. One, after how many decades, the USA has been alone in the Arctic to defend it all by itself under the open seas. Notice I say that again because that is not the law of the seas. We're going to get into that now. The United States of America never signed on to the League of Nations. They never entered the membership. One of the reasons for that was the law of the sea. International waters, high seas, do not belong to any state's jurisdiction. Known under the doctrine of mare liberum, states have the right to fishing, navigation, overflight, laying cables and pipelines, as well as scientific research. The United States of America, post the League of Nations, after World War II, under Geneva, signed 4 treaties. The Convention of the High Seas, and 3 others that we're going to go into. The United States was clear that they would never sign secret treaties. They were always constitutionally bound to unilateralism and direct trade. Here we see the United States of America, one of 5 permanent Security Council members of the UN, and their position as signer of the Law of the High Seas, Convention of the High Seas, not Law of the Seas, Convention of the High Seas. This is world-binding law by all 5 permanent Security Council members. Here we see the United States of America addressing from 1962 to 1974 every nation that tried to stop them on the Law of the High Seas, and the USA saying, no, this is our sovereignty, our right, this is international law. You see it with Russia, Germany, Bulgaria, Mexico, and 2 others. The Convention of Territorial Sea. Here again, United States of America, along with all 5 permanent Security Council members, go through it from 1962 all the way to 1974. The only time USA signed on to any treaty of the seas. This is the law of territorial sea. The Convention on Fishing and Conservation of the Living Resources of the High Seas. USA states, with an understanding that such a ratification shall not be construed to impair the applicability of the principle of abstention, which is an American law giving states that no federal government can go into the regions, which are of the 50 states, to overturn using this law to take away from a state's right to fishing and conservation in their open waters. Convention on the Continental Shelf, 1958, the last one, and the one where Canada and USA butt heads. And you'll notice the date, July 16th, 1970, and who created the kerfluffle? There he is, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Now we're going to get into what the Continental Shelf Rift was by the Liberals. Fast forward to 1982, and there he is again, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, once again re-elected Prime Minister. Signs the UN Convention of Law of the Sea, December 1982. USA does not sign on to the Law of the Sea. They remain with the 4 treaties bound by the 5 permanent Security Council members. This Ocean's Law of the Sea is a non-binding agreement not signed by USA, not enforceable in international law. Anything to win votes. As you can see by the 2 graphs, it shows Canada's fishing and it shows world fishing on or near Canadian waters, which were invited in by the Canadian government. Overfishing from Pierre Elliott Trudeau's period, which you'll see there is election in 1968, all the way through to he took the Convention of Law of the Seas up until 1982, until the late 80s, the complete demise of the cod, almost to the point they were nearly extinct, and they've never ever recovered since. The bottom graph shows you the history of all the world nations that were allowed to fish in Canada during those first few periods, and you'll notice USA was not in there. They had the Convention on Fisheries and Conservation. They honored it. They never entered Canada waters to do that. It wasn't until 1982 that the USA started flexing its muscle on its 200 nautical miles. And then they started a little bit into the Canadian waters, but nothing ever to the extent that Canada did to itself under Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He had the East completely fish out the cod. It was done by Canadians in the East, Trudeau going for votes. It was total liberal, unconservation, totally against the Convention on Fishing and Conservation, world binding law by the 5. He signed the non-binding Law of the Seas, which is only called international law because of what countries go in it, but it can't be bound in any international court. So fast forward to 2013 and we get Stephen Harper laying claim to the North Pole. He sends the UN Law of the Seas demand to change the boundaries of the North Pole and much of the Arctic. Of course, if you look, you'll see Russia tips on that scale too, within the 200 nautical miles. And Putin of Russia, they did sign the Law of the Sea. However, they're a United Nations Security Council member, permanent 5. And it's not bound in international law. The USA never signed the Law of the Sea, not during Obama's administration or under the guise of Hillary Clinton. Harper teamed up with the Liberal Democrats in the United States to try and lay claim and push Russia out. Never going to happen. The United States only goes by the 4 conventions of 1958. Under multilateralism, the USA never does multilateralism. And this is where Harper was a complete sucker for the liberal left in the United States of America. Obama and Hillary used Harper to create the tensions with Russia that live long and proud today with, we're going to get into it, Justin Trudeau next. Fast forward to December 2019, and we have Justin Trudeau one-upping Stephen Harper. He's going to go after Russia for the North, and he's going after USA for the Eastern Atlantic. This is being placed in the submission's going to be done on the Arctic shelf, continental shelf. So it's going to challenge USA according to international law as a permanent Security Council member, and he's challenging Russia under the Law of the Sea, which is not international law. Either way, he's going to lose. Extreme liberal left, and then we got Harper underneath on the Democrat left. It's all liberal, not good. Well, we all know of Justin Trudeau's love of the Chinese communism, the pure dictatorship, his admiration for it. No immigration minister before or since Jason Kenney brought in as many communist Chinese or students to the university and colleges of Canada by a whopping 300%. Jason Kenney used his power as immigration minister to alienate the Republican Party and Russia, pushing them past the brink with his blatant Santa Claus remarks, knowing full well of St. Nicholas's history of Turkey and the Russian-Turkey history and war, and where they've come today as being the two largest trading partners in their dominion. This is who you elected. This is Jason Kenney.
Let me just say, though, that I think the comparison, the numbers you just selected might not be perfectly reflective of the situation. In any given year, you're going to have spikes and troughs in particular programs. But overall, we've been admitting over 250,000 newcomers, which represents the highest sustained level of immigration in Canadian history. We've been adding the equivalent of 0.8% of our population, which is the highest per capita level of immigration in the developed world. Overall, we've actually increased slightly family immigration, and the number, for example, with refugees, because in one particular year in 2005, there was a spike in processing at the IRB. But overall, we're actually increasing the number of resettled UN Convention refugees that we invite to Canada by 20%. So overall, believe it or not, the ratios are consistent, actually probably slightly fewer economic immigrants, but very high levels. The problem is that too many of those immigrants end up unemployed and underemployed, and that's the...
This is Jason Kenney back in 2013, not 2020 Alberta, but just watch and follow along. This was all foretold.
So tell me this then. There's an argument that by putting employers, essentially, in charge of who comes to Canada because of the employees that they need, in some respects you take the issue of immigration out of the quote-unquote public's hands.
Believe it or not, this is Jason Kenney, 2013, being grilled by CPAC. Now, you listen for yourself and you tell me that there is not a real correlation between then and now.
You were quite a featured star at the Vancouver Convention the Liberals had. They were talking about you all the time. How much is it going to tick you off if the worst recession since the Great Depression puts all of this at all of your efforts in the toilet, because that's where the economy is? I'm Irish, Steve. We're used to tough times, but
Thank you for joining me in part 1 of major series on Jason Kenney and what he's doing to destroy Alberta and who he really is. This bastard out of Ottawa has been here before many times. I'm going to leave you all with this. These are your constitutional, inalienable rights that were given to you in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. These are the things that the people of Canada and the people of Alberta have as their last weapons of resource.
And there's a common set of rules, liberal democratic rules, respect for freedom of religion, freedom of expression, equality between men and women.
You remember that, Albertans. Freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of quality of life. Remember those words by Jason Kenney. He spoke them in 2008.